Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. It was an announcement that sent shockwaves across the Middle East and beyond. The United Arab Emirates became only the third Arab country and the first in more than 25 years to recognize the state of Israel. Already, the diplomatic blowback is being felt, with the Palestinians calling the move a betrayal. Haidar Abbasi explains.
It's a deal few saw coming. The normalizing of ties between Israel and an Arab state. But it's the US president who's taking credit for sealing it.
Just a few moments ago, I hosted a very special call with two friends, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates, where they agreed to finalize a historical peace agreement. Everybody said this would be impossible.
The agreement seems to be the culmination of years of discreet meetings.
So we were thinking, let us try and put one and one together. Let us try and develop this organic relationship that is developing with Israel in many, many areas. And let's really try and get something tangible.
The Emiratis say one condition of the deal is that Israel delay its plan to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. However, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has made it clear the annexation will still happen.
שום שינוי בתוכנית שלי להחיל את הריבונות שלנו ביהודה ושומרון, בתיאום מלא עם ארצות הברית.
Since it was founded in 1948, Israel has fought several Arab armies, normalizing relations with only two, Egypt and Jordan. But it seems the UAE has opened the floodgates. There's talk of Bahrain, Oman, and other Arab countries also recognizing the Jewish state. So what's behind this momentum? Several Gulf states are worried about Iran's expanding regional influence. Tehran now has proxy militias in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Israel shares these concerns, especially when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. Although the UAE and Israel are celebrating, Palestinians consider the deal a betrayal.
حقوق الشعب الفلسطيني للدولة الفلسطينية لرؤية الدولتين للقدس الشريف التي ضمت وأعلن ضمها تنكروا إلى كل هذا وقالوا نحن جئنا لكم بالضم فافرحوا أيها الفلسطينيون. هذه مخادعة وهذا أمر مرفوض كل الرفض وهذا نعتبره طعنة في ظهر القضية الفلسطينية.
For years, it's been understood that normalization between Israel and the Arab world will be based on Palestinians achieving statehood. But under this latest agreement, Palestinians still have no state and still live under Israeli occupation. Haidar Abbasi, Straight Talk.
And joining me now from London is Ian Black, who is a senior fellow at the LSE Middle East Center. And from Amman, Daoud Kuttab, who is a Palestinian journalist and Director General of the Community Media Network. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Ian, has this agreement come as a surprise?
It was a surprise in the sense that there was no prior information about it. It was announced last Thursday, I think. But of course, the geopolitical context of increasingly close relations between Israel and the UAE has been apparent for many years now. I think it began in around 2006. And it's been going on for a long time, and it reflects a wider regional trend of increasingly close and indeed visible links between Israel and the Gulf states. But the UAE has been the outlier in that sense. It's been most visible and highly developed.
So, Daoud, what's your take on Turkey's reaction? Why it considers this agreement null and void?
Well, I think it's null and void because it violates the Arab Peace Plan. The Arab Peace Plan, which, by the way, was initiated by UAE's best friend, the Saudis, says clearly that normalization should follow the Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territories. It's also null and void because it basically gives away something for free to a very corrupt and anti-Palestinian leader of Israel for free. There's really nothing that they got out of it. They didn't really stop the annexation, and if anything, it was already stopped or slowed down by countries like Jordan, by Germany, by other countries. And so they really gave away something for free.
Yes, but I mean, what kind of a role the United Arab Emirates played in regards to the Palestinians? Are they in a position to decide on Palestinian lands, Palestinian people's future? What's your take on that?
Yes, I think what my take is that the Palestinians have very strong power of negation, but they don't have any power of getting what they want. They can stop any peace deal that doesn't meet their minimum standards, but there's really nothing they can do about forcing the Israelis to end the occupation. So it's a shame because, I mean, the Arab Emirates has generally been supporting Palestinians, but they really have no military relationship or conflict with Israel. And I think it weakens the ability of a non-violent resolution to the conflict because Mahmoud Abbas has based his entire strategy on diplomacy and on the Arab world supporting him.
Yeah.
So this weakens the point of view.
Yeah. So Ian, in your opinion, what's the main aim of this agreement? I mean, to keep the US military engaged in the region, isolate Turkey, punish Qatar, and avert the Iranian threat?
Well, I think that both countries, both the parties want to please Washington, whether or not President Donald Trump is re-elected this November. They both see the US as a key strategic ally in the Middle East, and particularly with regard to Iran's regional ambitions, and indeed their common view of the Iranian threat. I think that it serves Netanyahu's interests because although he had pledged repeatedly to go ahead with Israel's unilateral annexation of parts of the West Bank, he realized that the international opposition to that would be very damaging. So in a sense, the offer by the Emiratis of this deal got him off the hook in a way that was a win-win situation for him. He could present it as Israel increasingly accepted by the Arab world and avoid something which would be damaging to Israel's reputation. But of course, at the same time, he's promised that annexation is not off the agenda and it has merely been postponed.
Yes. So, I mean, can this agreement prod Israel to accept a Palestinian state maybe, Daoud? Are you optimistic about that?
I think I am optimistic, but for a totally different reason. I think this is weakening a lot Mahmoud Abbas's strategy, and it's pushing Palestinians more and more to unity and to really rethinking their whole strategy of whether they want a two-state solution, one-state solution. And I think it's going to near, hopefully, the new elections and maybe the incoming of new leadership to the Palestinians. And that's what gives me optimism.
Mm-hmm. So, and are there any similar agreements in the works with other Arab or Gulf states? Who is more likely to follow suit, Ian?
Well, the countries that are mentioned are usually Bahrain and Oman. The Bahrainis have been pretty close to the Emiratis in terms of their open dealings in the direction of normalization with Israel. Netanyahu visited Oman accompanied by the head of the Mossad intelligence service at the end of 2018. So that's a possibility. the Saudis have made clear, and the Saudis really matter, of course, because they're the largest of the Arab Gulf states, and they enjoy a particularly prominent position in the region. The Saudis have made clear that they remain committed to the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, and of course the Emirati departure from that sets a dangerous precedent in terms of Arab unity, in terms of the recognition of Israel by any Arab state, regardless of whether that helps resolve the Palestinian issue. I think Israel, in the big picture, Israel can normalize relations with all Arab states, hypothetically, potentially, but the Palestinians, of course, are not going to go away until the occupation is ended.
So, Daoud, do you think this agreement succeed to garner popular support among Arab countries and Gulf countries?
I don't, actually. I don't agree that any other country will follow suit for the following reasons. One, the Emirates got something very bad used product from the Israelis. I doubt that the Israelis are going to give anything to Bahrain or Oman or even Sudan. Secondly, Oman and Bahrain are much closer to the Saudi Arabia than they are to the Emirates. And thirdly, we saw how basically the Emirates have been really badly hurt. Their image has been tarnished. You see pictures now of Al-Aqsa. People burnt the pictures of the leader and they stepped on him and they called him a traitor. I don't think the Arabs gain much from these agreements, and they lose much more than what they gain.
Do you believe that the international community cares about its tarnished image, because the European Union basically just welcomed this agreement, but also said they'll be, of course, pursuing their commitment for a two-state solution? How viable is this?
Well, the Bahrainis said that they will, make a decision by the end of the year. And this, to me, tells me that they're waiting to see what happens in the elections in America. If Trump is not elected, then the pressure is not going to be on them as much as if he is elected. If he's elected, they will be under tremendous pressure to do that. So I think a lot depends on what happens in November in the U.S.
So, Ian, some analysts argue that with this agreement, Israel has become part of a solution, not part of a problem. Or do you agree that it succeeded in breaking the Arab wall for the Palestinian cause without firing a bullet?
Well, I think there is a danger of that. I agree with Daoud that it's not automatically taken for granted that others will follow, but it is an important moment, nevertheless, in breaking the long-standing Arab consensus about normalization with Israel without a solution to the Palestinian issue, which the Palestinians themselves, of course, have to accept. I agree with Daoud that one of the effects is likely to be a rethinking of the Palestinian strategy. Absolutely. I mean, long before this agreement long before the agreement between Israel and the UAE, the Palestinians had been effectively marginalized. So they do need to rethink their overall strategy, and young people are increasingly doing that. But I do not believe myself that the increasingly fashionable idea of a one-state solution in which both peoples have equal rights is in any way achievable. Nobody has a workable strategy to achieve that goal.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. The immediate impact of the coronavirus pandemic can be seen in hospitals and the empty streets. But hidden in this global health crisis lies a danger whose consequences probably won't be seen for years. For young people, going to school isn't just about learning. It's also about developing social skills that are crucial later in life. And with lockdowns having forced Turkish education online, debate is ongoing about the need to send students back to a real classroom. But at what cost? What risks are we willing to tolerate? Let's take a look at this report. And joining me now, Gamze Sart, who is an associate professor at Istanbul University's Faculty of Education. And joining me from New York, Robert Jenkins, who is the Global Chief of Education at UNICEF. Gamze, Robert, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. UN Chief has warned of a generational catastrophe as pandemic forces schools to be shut down in more than 160 countries. So, Robert, how is this impacting the future of the education system?
Well, indeed, it's a very disconcerting situation, a very challenging situation. At the height of the pandemic, we had 1.6 billion students' education disrupted. I mean, these are numbers that would be unheard of. That's more than 90% of the global student population, their schooling had been disrupted as a result of the pandemic. So an unparalleled challenge for the education sector. So we mobilized the UN system, all governments, parents, school systems to provide remote learning opportunities while schools were disrupted, and now are in the midst in most countries planning for or have started to reopen. And the key to that process is to reach all vulnerable children and to get them back learning as soon as possible.
So do you believe that these closures will undermine decades of progress?
So we were, meaning the world, was experiencing a global learning crisis even before the pandemic. There were tens of millions of children that were out of school, and even children in school were not learning. Many were not learning at the levels that we would be aspiring for them to learn at. So indeed, the pandemic caused further disruption to this crisis. And it impacted children in different ways. Those who did not have access to the internet, those who did not have access to the radio or TV, those who were living in remote locations or from poor backgrounds were particularly affected. And so indeed, we have seen their learning being disrupted. And that's why even more important for us all to mobilize now, reach these children, enable them to continue their learning and bridge them back into school.
Gamze, Turkey plans to open schools at the end of September. How do you think it will be able to balance health and education trade-off, and what kind of measures that are being taken? Is it safe to open schools?
Actually, as you know, that most of the students have struggled a lot because of health issues, especially those who have their parents who are working at the, let's say, as a worker, health worker. We know that we will have a big problem in terms of health issues because, you know, in the closed ecosystems at the schools, probably they are going to have problems like in other countries. Mm-hmm. Actually, Turkey has tried to find a solution in terms of health. We are very good, you know, in health, let's say, pandemic struggle prevention programs. However, at the schools, there are many, many young students that they are going. And for each group, they would have different problems. For instance, for the early age students, they are going to have different problems in terms of health. And those who are studying at the universities, they are going to have different problems. That's the reason why probably most of the universities are going to lock down and they are going to make remote. However, those who are in the high schools, they are going to make hybrid programs. And I strongly believe that most of the early age, let's say, school students, they are going to suffer a lot because they need concrete education at the ecosystems. And Turkey trying to do some, let's say, preventions, but I think that like other countries, we are going to have big problems. Yesterday, we have a very important, let's say, meeting with the healthcare, and then we try to find a solution for a small new kit for the students that they are going to check every 14 days in order to create safety environment.
Okay, so Robert, has this online learning, this new system, widened the learning gap between the rich and the poor? And do you believe that this system is sustainable, especially for girls' educations, as you just briefly mentioned, in rural areas, in poor areas? What do you make of it?
Indeed, we are seeing vulnerable kids being left behind. In some countries, they would be disabled children, children living in remote locations. Girls are particularly affected, adolescent girls. And we saw in previous extended school closures, like in the response to the Ebola crisis in West Africa, girls were particularly affected in a variety of ways, including, very importantly, the protection that schools offer and a safe space to learn. So what's critical is that we understand those vulnerabilities, we understand how each child is being affected, and we proactively reach the most vulnerable. In a recent UNICEF survey, in nearly half of the countries that we collected data from, which was over 100 countries, children living in urban households were twice as likely to have a TV that compared to children in rural households, which just again reemphasizes how important it is to have different strategies to reach just different children so we don't increase this digital divide and all children are reached. Now, a lot of exciting things are happening, like in countries like Somalia, offline recorded lessons are being uploaded onto solar-powered tablets, being distributed and made available to children. In Vietnam, we have tests and modules being dropped and the curriculum being modified and postponed in order to pick up, and children can catch up from missed lessons. So a lot of very interesting and innovative things are happening throughout the world to reach the most vulnerable children and enable them to learn.
So it's not as grim as it looks. So Gamze, how will this new system affect students psychologically? Do you believe that they need also an emotional support besides academic support?
Yes, definitely. Most of them have really mental problems because they are living, let's say, a kind of violence at home. Most of the mothers and parents or fathers are not ready for that. We do need really good, let's say, ecosystem to support and empower parents before the kids, actually, because most of the parents are really very problematic in terms of asking and requesting enough requirements without knowing pedagogy. Right now, we are working on digital pedagogy because most of the teachers also are not ready for that. We have to create a new digital pedagogy for them. And I strongly believe that, from a perspective of STEM or STEAM classes, they are suffering a lot and they need mental health, let's say, prevention for them. We do need proactive approach. That's the reason why we are working and we are creating a new curriculum and also training program in terms of mindfulness. But mindfulness, really brain-based mindfulness. We try to find solution for them. We are working with the most of the teachers and also psychological counselors at the schools, and we try to find solution, especially for different age groups.
Yes.
And the teachers are not ready for that. We created a platform for them to create and to supply enough information about mindfulness and a metacognitive approach for them.
Yeah, okay. The question is that, will it be accessible to all? Unfortunately, we're out of time. Gamze, Robert, thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.